Our first home as newlyweds was a condo in the city, about a mile from the nearest state university. It was 2 stories with 2 bedrooms and 1.5 baths, the full bath upstairs and the half downstairs for guests. Just past the living room, an informal dining area gave way to a modest square kitchen on the left and a patio door leading to an outdoor space that was not expansive or private enough to be called a backyard, yet a tad too big and secluded to be called a patio. About 15 yards squared, it had a fence, a paved center, and in-ground beds around the perimeter, while just beyond the fence were paths to the other condos, and one look up and off to the side or across the fence we could see our neighbors' windows. Somehow, it was still a dream for 22-year-old me. I could have my own garden, just like my grandma. I imagine a rich garden space filled with wildflowers, herbs, vegetables, and cutting flowers like roses and tulips. In my mind, roses would nod and bow fat, fragrant blooms around the fence year-round. Mint and lavender would grow wild. We'd pull carrots and potatoes from the soil and eat cherry tomatoes off the bush like I did as a kid at Grandma's house. In my naivety, I had no clue of which seasons things grew in, or how harsh our inland sun could be. As I was not only a new gardener, I was a new transplant to the area. It never dawned on me that good dirt was soil, and poor soil was dirt. Not just any dirt, but hard, compacted ground void of nutrients, water, and air. I also knew nothing about being a wife. I knew nothing about the ways life and time prune two into one, each bearing their own harvest, weathering sicknesses, aches, and hurts, or all the other ways nature and life seasons us. I had barely begun the work of understanding who I was, Edward perhaps the same, and yet somehow we knew enough to recognize love forever in the other. I decorated our first kitchen in sage green and found everything that echoed gardening and wildflowers to decorate. My first kitchenware set was a deep green with leaves imprinted around the edges, and my first silverware set was also adorned with leaves. I bought decorative tin watering cans from the local Joann's in fall when summer's decor went on sale, and placed them around the 80s kitchen filled with orange oak cabinets and almond white tile counters. It was quaint and homey in the best way. Our first gardening adventure started in January. We bundled up and went out to plant spring bulbs while a light mist fell. I'd gathered from my Martha Stewart magazines and gardening books that I was very much behind in planting spring bulbs, having no clue I was on time for my Zone 9B garden. I didn't even know zones existed. Nevertheless, there were crocuses, daffodils, irises, and tulips upon tulips to echo my wedding bouquet. I had also gathered all the Martha Stewart herb and wildflower seeds we could afford from the local Kmart. I was determined to have a Martha Stewart garden and brown picket fence marriage with this beautiful man with flecks of gold in his eyes and a sense of humor that confirmed he would be the finest dad with corny jokes and loving arms. We soon learned the ground was hard, rocky, and untended as we struggled to pull weeds and dig holes deep enough to bury the bulbs and corms. But we were young, and I was headstrong and determined to grow a rich tapestry of flowers, herbs, and vegetables along with our new life. We were poor gardeners. The hard labor and stiff muscles from our first experience taunted and haunted us whenever we thought about going back outside. Instead, we'd spend weekends out exploring, trying new restaurants, sleeping in on weekends, hanging out with friends, and constantly putting off to next weekend working in the garden. With luck, spring surprised us. Crocus flowers pushed the clay soil aside, and despite our neglect and the harsh soil, got on with the business of blooming. We were gardeners, so we thought. The few crocuses that danced their purple top hats of petals above the soil faded all too fast and never became the overflowing well of blooms I had expected of them. Then, as spring gave way to the early days of summer, we realized the crocuses were the only flowers that would bloom, and we found ourselves discouraged and distracted. A short 18 months after we moved in, we sold the condo and purchased our first home. We wanted to become parents and dreamed of a home for our young family. Within a week of deciding it was time to move on, we went into escrow on a sweet home with a room for a baby, an art studio for me, and a large backyard with a beautiful tall cypress tree, and what we soon discovered, a fig tree that would perfume the kitchen and house come summer. One Saturday my mother-in-law was visiting. I showed her our growing patch, and she hastened me to not only pick our first harvest, but take the first bite of the sweet cucumber, telling me in Mexico it is believed that the first bite of any harvest makes one fertile. Sure enough, soon we were expecting our first baby, a sweet baby girl born late January, and just 18 months later, a sweet baby boy in late September. As our marriage and family matured, so did our love of gardening. Well, mine did. Edward did not always enjoy the hard labor and long days spent working in the soil. But in time, the sweetness of harvest sold him, and gardening soon became a sacred space and time for us. We decided early in our marriage I would stay at home with the kids, and the loss of income meant we had to sacrifice date nights, eating out, outside entertainment like movies, and extras like yearly family vacations. Our parents worked 6, sometimes 7 days a week, so we didn't want to steal their precious days off with babysitting. Dating outside of the house alone didn't happen for us until about 9 or 10 years into parenthood, and even then it was a very rare occurrence. To have couple time, we started having garden dates. We set the kids up with their own PlayStations where we could watch over them, and then we would work on different patches of our backyard, enjoying each other's company and nature. It was a win 3 times over because we got couple time, something entertaining to do, and a chance to grow our own organic food, saving us money. Should we get all the weeds? With lots of time on my hands, I began to pour myself more and more into the garden, often sneaking out in the wee hours of the morning to get alone time before the kids woke. The garden became my confidant. In mourning, in stress, in joy, the garden was there to welcome, hold, and nurture me.
I didn't know you had a weeder.
Putting it in the wrong thing. I learned patience and perseverance. I learned how to let go and deal with loss, as I would fall in love with plants and soon have to compost them as their seasons passed and gave way to seeds for a new generation. I overcame my fear of bees and lizards, and I'm not embarrassed to admit butterflies and dragonflies, although I still run screaming from June bugs. I learned about abundance and gratitude when in our leanest, most financially difficult times, I learned to see the abundance of seeds as a form of richness, a gift I had never considered before. It is hard to feel poor when you hold hundreds of mustard seeds in your hands, knowing that each one has the potential to produce thousands of seeds, and each one of those seeds could provide nourishing food. What we didn't know as we spent hours upon hours years in the garden is that it was teaching us how to love each other. The garden was not just my confidant. She became our teacher, pruning us, guiding us on life. Being married is not about falling in love every day or being in love constantly. It is about growing, cultivating, and nurturing a rich life together. Part of that process is learning how to deal with the dandelions and aphids of life and love. It is about learning how to nurture each other and yourselves so that you might produce fruit or flower to be shared. There is a symbiosis between spouses where the richness of one sweetens the other and the troubles of one impacts the other. We have learned that while our love might be as sweetly scented as a freesia flower in bloom, it does not mean there won't be weeds around that need pulling. Our roses might bloom with powdery mildew on its leaves, or aphids might march up its stems and tuck themselves around the sepals. Like a garden, marriage requires tending, nurturing. Sometimes we must prune ourselves to support the growth of our partners. Other times we might experience a rich abundance of a harvest, both bearing heavy fruit.
Yeah, they're swarming over there.
Can put water too much is fruit. There are times when one of us is ill or going through a challenging season and the other needs to provide shade or support. And then there are times of great loss when seasons change and we are surrounded by nothing familiar and the follow winter seasons of nature and life. Ourselves, our gardens, our marriages might become anemic just as well as becoming rich in full body from time to time.
Is this trash?
Yeah.
Or does this go through?
Oh no, this is seeds. Go
Seeds.
through. What I have learned after 24 years of tending to the garden of us is that the journey, the everyday, the hard and rich rewarding parts, all of it, from the moments we annoy each other to the moments we are wildly in love, all of it is rich and wonderful. I cannot have the wildflowers without the weeds, the roses without the aphids, the tomatoes without the hornworms, and likewise I cannot have Edward's beautiful, gold-flecked eyes rimmed with lush eyelashes without having the man who snores and wakes me up in the middle of the night. And likewise, he cannot have his passionate, color-loving wife without my fear of driving up mountains or my pure dislike of driving myself anywhere. Our life has been filled with heart-filling and heart-wrenching moments, seasons of birthing our children and witnessing new life, and seasons of burying grandmothers 3 months apart, and 2 parents within 5 years. We cannot have the sweet, slow dancing in the kitchen without the silly moments of fussing over who should preheat the oven at the end of a long Tuesday. Each serves a purpose. The hard years fortify us, the sweet ones offer hope, the mundane give us rest. All of them prune and shape this life into the sweetest poem of us. I do not dare proclaim to understand the purpose of late summer's powdery mildew and our summer squash, or the goodness of aphids and hornworms, although it might be argued that they pollinate, I suppose. And in the moments the tiffs and beefs amongst tired, hungry spouses seems unnecessary to even the most deep and thoughtful amongst us. I'm just going to what? But I think those moments teach us how to love fully. They teach us gratitude for the sweet winds. They lead us to develop humility, empathy, or if nothing else, force us to be more mindful, patient, and intentional in the garden, in the home, and within ourselves. And that which gives way to something as beautiful as humility, empathy, compassion, mindfulness, and intention, that creates something new in us, the world, the very definition of poetry. And as Lord teach us, we do not have the luxury to live without the complexity and absolute beauty of poetry. Our first song. We be a garden of us. Us is you, then me, then you, and the life of we. Every sun again we meet in this space of ether and try ever, ever, ever again. Sometimes the season of now wears as thin as bee wings. Some other times the road gets on us, stands on our backs, shoulders, run down our arms, and wear as smooth as pebbles beneath slow water. Never no mind we be sure, as aphids on collards come spring, we be doing this somehow. Never no mind we be steady like sunrises and moon, fall then winter, next spring and summer soon. We never no mind. We be a garden of two, a couplet of crepe myrtles, us done learn to yield, tend our bed, seeing light come seasons of pruning, seasons of winnowing and whittling our spent selves, and there us be with sheets of bark scattered around our ankles. On us the color of years, every cleaving and unveiling, every sunder and unearthing of the everlasting. In celebration, Keith.